This entire worksheet that you guys should be able to do. The only thing that's missing is adding and subtracting rationals, which is fractions, right? Everybody should know how to add and subtract integers. 13 and 14, don't worry about it. We haven't covered absolute value yet. You should be able to multiply integers, multiply rational numbers, divide integers, right? It's really easy to multiply fractions. You guys should be able to do all that. And of course, I always give you your answers on the back of the worksheet. What for? So you could copy them down? No. So you could check your answers as you go. The worst thing you could do as a student in math is, even worse than copying. The worst thing you could do in math is just get an assignment and just complete it all without checking your work. Because if you're doing things the wrong way, you're technically learning the wrong stuff, right? So I give you the answers so you could check your work on each one. That way you keep yourself on track and make sure you're actually practicing what you're supposed to be practicing. Anyway, you should be able to do this whole first left column. And now up here is where the struggle should come in. So let's work on this together. Multiplying fractions is easy. All you have to do is multiply the top with the top, bottom with the bottom. Or you could reduce first and then multiply. Let's do one of these before we even add or subtract. Like 13. See, if there were a 2 up here and a 2 down here, I'd cancel out the 2's. Or if there were a 3 up here and a 3 down there, I'd cancel out the 3's. But let's just multiply across. So when I multiply across, 2 times 5 is 10. 3 times 7 is 21. And there's my answer. So as you can see, it's ridiculously easy to multiply fractions, all right? 14, let's do 14 because it's so easy. You see how there's a 2 up here and a 2 down here? Let's just scratch those out and now multiply. And you'll have obviously 1 on top, 5 on the bottom, and it's a negative times a positive, which means it's going to be a negative. So your answer is negative 1/5. By the way, if you notice that I made a mistake on the answers, please let me know. I do make mistakes. So I just wanted to emphasize how easy it is to multiply fractions. Now, adding and subtracting is not that easy. It's easy when you have a common denominator. Okay? If you have a common denominator, then all you got to do is combine the numerator with the numerator. So because we have a 4 down here and a 4 down there, our answer will have that common 4. And simply look at the numerator, 1 plus 1, that equals 2. And the only other thing you have to do is reduce if possible. So 2/4 reduces down to 1/2. And there's your answer. Okay? Now that one's easy because you have a common denominator. What if you don't have a common denominator? Well, you have to get a common denominator. Number 2 does not have a common denominator. All right? So the denominators are different. There's a 2 here and a 4 there. Now, what you got to do is check and see if you could change one to make it look like the other. Right? Now, sometimes you're going to have to modify both to make them a common denominator. But this 4, you could actually take that 2 and make it look like a 4. How could you do that? By what Silas said, multiplying by 2. And of course, whatever you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. So this first fraction, the 1/2, is actually going to become 2 over 4 instead of 1/2. And that makes total sense because 2 over 4 is the same thing as 1/2. Now the other fraction is already with the denominator 4. So you could just bring down the plus sign, bring down that denominator 4. Since we didn't do anything to that denominator 4, you don't do anything to the numerator. And now that you have a common denominator, the 4 right there and the 4 right there, now you could actually add 2 plus 1, which gives you 3. And it's over that common denominator 4. And you cannot simplify, so there's your answer for number 2. Yay? Yes. Okay. Now, here's one where you cannot change this 2 to make it look like a 5 because 2 times 2 is 4, not 5, and 2 times 3 is 6, not 5. So here you're going to have to modify both 2 and 5 to get a common denominator. So what's that common denominator going to be? 10, right? Now, if you're ever stuck with common denominators, I would go with the biggest number and see, okay, could I change 5? The 5 times 2 is 10. I could change that to 10. So yes, the common denominator is 10. So everybody right now on number 3, put a 10 down here. Put a 10 down here. So what I'm doing is I'm rewriting this fraction to have a 10 instead of a 2. But how do I change this 2 to a 10? Times 5. So times 5. And you will get 5 up on top because 5 times 1 is 5. Now we still have a minus sign between the two fractions. And over here, 5 times 2 got us the 10. So times 2, what are we going to have on the numerator right here? A 2. All right, so now that we have a common denominator, we could actually get our final answer, which is what?
It'll be
3 over 10.
And you cannot simplify.
And you cannot simplify. Let's take a look at number 4 over here.
You
Multiply what by what?
2.
You want to get that 4 to make it look like an 8, so you're going to multiply it by 2, right?
Yeah, and then whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top.
That's right.
So you have 6 over 8.
6 over 8. Let me, hold on a second. So since the 1/8 already has a common denominator, or has that denominator 8, just rewrite it, and it's a minus 1/8. So now you can just do the top with the top. 6 take away 1, that is 5. 5/8. Can't reduce, that's your answer right there. What do you guys think? It's not bad. I think you guys could do number 5. Let me jump to number 6.
Multiply by 3 and 10.
Multiply. Now, how about this? Instead of just showing you how to do it, let me show you the thought process, right? You look at the biggest number and you think, could I change this to become 8? No, right? 6 times 1 is 6, it's not 8. 6 times 2 is 12, it's not 8. All right. So what I would do, or what I recommend you to do, is take this 8, multiply it by 2 in your head. What's 8 times 2? 16. Could I change 6 to become 16? No. How about 6 times 3? 24. Could I change 6 to become 24? Yes, you can. So again, my recommendation is go with the bigger denominator and start seeing, could I change the smaller number to the bigger one? No, I can't. So multiply it by 2, 16. Oh, I can't change that to 16. Multiply it by 3, 24. Hey, I could change that to 24. That way you actually get the lowest common denominator, which is 24, we just said. Because some other students are saying, oh, let's just multiply 6 times 8 and get 48, which that will work, but you got bigger numbers to deal with. So it's easier to take your time, get that bigger denominator, multiply it by 2, see if you could change that to 16. You can't. Multiply it by 3, it's 24. See if you could change that to 24. Yes, you can. So 24 is your LCD, your lowest common denominator. Multiply that by 3 to get to 24. So you have to multiply the top by 3. And what do we get? 21. Okay, now it is still a minus problem, a subtraction problem. Now the other one, 6 times what gets us at 24?
4.
Times 4. Okay, so times 4, what do we get up on top over here? Yeah, 20.
1 over 24, and you cannot simplify it.
And yeah, when you take away the 21, take away 20, you get 1. And it's still over that common denominator 24. And that's as far as you could go. So yeah, sometimes you could just modify one of those denominators to make it look like the other one. But sometimes you have to modify both. Like right here on number 3, we modified both. We made them both 10. But sometimes it's better to take your time and think of the bigger denominator, multiply it by 2, see if you could change that to a 16, multiply it by 3, and oh, I could change that to become 24. Now, if you have a mixed number, it might be a good idea to change it to an improper fraction, especially if you're dealing with like number 7. We could say, let's actually change it to an improper fraction. Do we know how to change a mixed number into an improper fraction? Take the 3,
Yeah, and you multiply times 2.
multiply,
And divide it.
and then add,
Oh, yeah.
right? So you take the 3, you multiply it by 2, and then you add 1. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1, 7. And it's still over that common denominator 3, all right? So let me rewrite this problem. I have a 5 out in front, I have a minus sign, and the new fraction as an improper fraction is 7 over 3. Now that makes total sense because 7 divided by 3, it'll go in 2 times. You have a remainder of 1 over the original denominator 3. I hope we remember how to change mixed numbers into improper fractions. All right, so if I want to subtract the 5 minus 7 over 3, it's a fraction, I need a common denominator. What denominator does the 5 have? 1. Okay. So let's get a common denominator. What will my common denominator be? Between 1 and 3. Here's a denominator 1. Here's a denominator 3. What's my common denominator? 3. So I want to change that 1 to a 3, and that 3 is already a 3. So how do I change the 1 to become a 3? Multiply by 3, multiply by 3. What do I get up on top?
15.
15. On the other one, what do I multiply by? Nothing, right? Or by 1 if you want to say. So it's still going to be a 7 up there. And it's going to be a minus sign. What is 15 take away 7? 8. 8/3 is your final answer. Now, on a multiple choice test, you might not see this improper fraction 8/3. They might change it back to a mixed number. Okay? So you could change that back by simply dividing. How do we divide the 8 on top? It's divided by the 3 on the bottom. And the answer will be 3 times what gets you close to 8 without going over? 3 times 2 gets you close to 8 without going over. 3 times 2 is 6. When you subtract, you get a remainder of 2. And it's always the remainder over the original divisor. So 2 2/3 is the same answer as 8/3. Now, if it's just adding, I would just say, all right, we have 2 technically plus 2/3 plus 1/2. So I could just say, I want to hold off on this 2 over here because there's really a plus sign between the 2 and the 2/3, right? 2 and 2/3 really means 2 wholes plus 2/3 of another. So I could focus in on this fraction problem where I'm adding both and then add that whole number 2 at the very end, right? So what would my common denominator be right here with the 3 and the 2? Adrian, what do you say? What's the common denominator of 3 and 2? You agree, Jessica? Do you agree? Yes, 6. All right, so if both become 6, what would I end up with on the numerator? Well, 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 3 is 3. I am adding. So now I could safely add the 4 plus 3. So what's 4 plus 3? 7. So I have 7 over 6 with the plus 2. So yeah, that 7/6 is an improper fraction. So on the side, if I were to do 7 divided by 6, it'll go in one whole time. You'll have a remainder of 1, and you put it over the original divisor 6. So it's really 1 and 1/6. So I really have 2 plus 1 and 1/6, which is technically 1 plus 1/6. So what's my final answer going to be? 3 and 1/6. All right, so I've done several problems on adding and subtracting fractions. The key to this lesson is that you need a common denominator to add or subtract fractions. Okay, you need a common denominator. So I would like you guys to work on the rest of this as practice. The answers are on the back. And in a couple of moments, I'm also going to give you a practice test because we will have a test tomorrow. It's a 100-point test. I want to give you a practice test almost identical to it. Okay? So I'll give you that in a couple of minutes. Right now, work on this worksheet. Check your answers on the back as you go.